Welcome to the post-review review show, where we review board games after other people have already reviewed them. And this is a game, Fallout by Fantasy Flight Games. And who's the designer on this one? Andrew Fisher and Nathan Hajek, which I'm not familiar with their work. I wasn't even really very familiar with this game until practically right before it came out, and it's been highly requested that I do a review of it. And by highly requested, I mean one person asked me in the YouTube comments on another video review that I did. And I'm gonna put it, is that the right corner? And for me, that's a lot of people, so I'm gonna do it. Also, my friend Mike, the one filming this review, it's his copy of the game, and I played it and I liked it, and I didn't actually expect to like it as much as I did, and I just kept playing it until I'd played it enough that I figured, well, I might as well do a review of it. And true to my formula, many other people have filmed reviews of this game, and I'll put them there as well. The guys at Dice Tower that did a Miami Dice video, that's when all three of them comment, and I would say that was maybe one of the more negative reviews, and then there are some positive reviews out there as well. I would say, and you probably know by now if you're watching this, that the game is a bit divisive among gamers as to whether it's good or whether it's bad. Now, I've been accused of being long-winded in my reviews in the past, so I'm just gonna cut right to the chase. If you like Ameritrash board games, and you like Fallout, and or a post-apocalyptic themes in your games, and you're okay with some randomness, and you like story, it's a lot of things. But if you are all of those things, I think this game is a ton of fun. I had a ton of fun playing it. It definitely helps if you're a fan of the Fallout IP. But I gotta tell you right now that I actually think that's the least important thing, because Fantasy Flight has done a good job with this game in terms of the world that they are created. I hate when people comment on the components of games because sometimes I feel like it's a bit silly, but the components are really good. This figure is amazing. This Brotherhood of Steel guy, look back, look at that plastic. You can practically see inside. There's literally darkness, all right? The figures are great. I think it's just enough plastic. I've also got to tell you that I'm a big fan of the fact that they went for this size box. I don't know if you've ever noticed this about Fantasy Flight, but you can tell how much money a game's gonna be based on the size of the box. This is the $60 box, right? I'm happy that they went with the $60 version of this game. I'm happy that the enemies are these little chits. It's actually a pretty good system because you see this symbol right here? That means that you place one of these guys out and they actually start flipped up. And this tells you their stats, this tells you how they get hit, this tells you their special ability, this tells you how much life they have. I'll let you watch somebody else's review for a more thorough breakdown of how that works. But combat and everything in this game is settled with these VATS dice, and they're a pretty interesting little system. They're fun. It's really just a fun D6. I mean, honestly, they could be numbers, right, with a chart. But this system works, it's simple, it's fun, it's Amerithrashy. This is the heart of what's good about this game. You put your little figure out, you do two things on your turn. You can explore, or you can, oh, look, there's a bad guy. I'm gonna put him out here. And then you move, and if you fight this guy and kill him, then you get experience equal to his level, and he gets replaced with a face down one. And then also you can do encounters, and this is where the game really shines actually, is these encounters. They've done a really interesting thing with this symbol, which are like ruins out in the wasteland. So there's always, there's always text that tells you what happens as the result of your choice, and sometimes it involves a check, and we didn't really get to talk about this, but there's a kind of interesting system about how leveling works, where you just fill up these things, and if you have that letter and it's in a check, so I guess it would be A and L, that gives you a reroll, and you're trying to get to 4, which with these dice is actually pretty difficult. I got a 1, so here's my first reroll. Now I'm up to 2, and here's my last reroll. I got a 4. That was amazing. It's almost as if I shot that a bunch of times and got really lucky, because that's like, ideally, that would be what happens with the 2. Getting a 4 with 2 rerolls is like within the realm of possibility, but still not likely. More, that's a bug. Bug go there. Bug go there. If you like the Fallout IP, I would definitely be more inclined to consider this game. I think they do a good job with it. I feel like I'm playing Fallout with my friends. You can visit vaults, and they do a really interesting thing with the story. So there are these quest cards, and then you'll notice that there are 2 different endings, and then they'll tell you to queue up other cards out of the deck. And so there's like a branching, these are obviously not related to each other, but there's like a branching quest structure, which is really interesting. And they've done a really good job with how that works. And then you'll notice that some of these, you notice how in this deck, this one looks like it's here. There are things that you can do in this game, either via quests or via decisions that you make in one of these cards. Sometimes it'll tell you to search through the game for, say, like this card, card number 156, and put it in here. And that's really neat, because the choices that you make in this game will lead to other things happening. And I don't want to give anything away in particular, but because I want it to be fresh for you the first time you play it, but not only, just like in the actual game of Fallout, there's the main storyline, and then there's a bunch of side stuff. And that side stuff, it all comes together in one interesting narrative if you're paying attention. Or just like with the actual video game, you can pay 0 attention to what's happening and just wander around the wasteland exploring and killing things. And it's fun. It's very, like I said, it's Amerithrash fun, and it feels like Fallout. And as I've almost said several times though, I think enjoying the Fallout license is the least important thing of all the things that I said are important for you to like this game. If you like post-apocalyptic settings in your board games in general, I think that this might have appeal to you. What's more important is accepting the fact that this is an Amerithrash or an Ameritrash or whatever you want to call it game at its heart, and that there's a great deal of variability. And there are some problems with that. And I actually have some house rules that I use that I'm going to talk about at the end of this review. But I won't talk about them yet, so if you're not interested, you can just skip that part, right? But I do want to say, before you have probably already stopped watching, about my house rules, is that I consider it to be actually sort of thematically okay. Because Fallout is a game that traditionally has a lot of mods. And I kind of consider they've done a good job with this game, with the quests and with the branching sort of structure, and they've created enough here that it's actually very easy to tweak or house rule a little bit to your own personal taste. And it kind of feels like, to me, like I'm just making a mod, like I'm hacking this game or something, this analog version of Fallout, which I have nowhere near the skill to make a mod for the computer game, like some people do, but I do know enough about board games that I can mod this, and I can make it a little bit better. And I'm going to tell you that I had a ton of fun fixing the problems, or what I saw as the problems of this game, and so I have to recognize that. Does this game have problems? Yes. See the Dice Tower review for what some of those are. But I had fun playing the game and fixing them. But the one that has to be addressed is the agenda cards. So there's this deck of cards, and you start the game with one, and I got a security one. Imagine that. And that means I get 1 point off the top, and you get extra points for the text on the card. And the extra text for the securities is related to this symbol. And so for each point distant the symbol is from this symbol, I gain an extra point. And then sometimes the quest cards give you a reward of an agenda card, right? So that's obviously pretty good, because you win by being the first person to, well, it depends on the player count, but a certain amount of influence, which is essentially just victory points. The problem with this system is that you're just top decking cards, which means, oh, look at that, I got a freedom. These are 2 cards that are essentially incompatible with each other, which, if you look through this deck, the vast majority of them are either a freedom or security. So not only is it highly likely that something like that happens, and then you get something like this thrown in for good measure, but the other thing that's really, really unfortunate, and you can only have 4 at a time, by the way, but the thing that's really unfortunate is the amount of times I've seen somebody draw 1, 2, 3 securities in a row and win the game because that's worth 9 points right there. And there's nothing that you as a player did to deserve that award. And it just sort of, there's a lot of variability in this game, from the dice to these cards are, well, these are quest cards, but these cards can be good or bad, and it's very circumstantial which one it'll be for you. There's a lot of luck there. The way that the shop works and the items that come out, you can see this is an amazing item, but there's a lot of cards here and you might not get one that is suitable for you. There's a lot of luck in this game, and that's fine in my opinion for what it is. It's always going to be a game where the best person does not necessarily win. But this is a real issue, because even if you win the game this way, and I'll tell you, I've been the person that drew an agenda card and said, oh, I guess I won. It doesn't feel like I earned it. And the other problem with it, if you want to go the route and just say, oh, well, just have fun with the story, this is still a problem, because it can lead to wild variability in game length. They can either be real short or they can take forever, which is, it's unfortunate either way. If it's too short, then you don't get through the whole main quest, which is actually pretty hard to do. Because if these, by the way, reach the bottom, it's game over, man. Game over, right? And that creates a real problem, especially if, say, you're working on freedoms and security is ahead of freedom. There's a real issue, right? Because that means that if you're working on these agendas, right, that means that you need to try to get this to surpass this. And what's more likely to happen is this prisoner's dilemma thing where nobody wins the game, right? Because you keeping those things clustered together just makes it take longer, and the longer the game takes, it's just much more likely that you just drive the game out. So it's like either somebody wins really quickly or it takes a long time and then nobody wins, right? And it's kind of bills itself as a semi-cooperative game, but it's really not a semi-cooperative game. It's really a competitive game where occasionally 2 people are kind of sort of working together. But it's not a semi-cooperative game like Dead of Winter, or a game with a hidden betrayer that's fully cooperative but somebody might be working against you. I mean, even if 2 people are working towards the same thing, because there's no agency in choosing these cards, these agenda cards, it doesn't feel like a choice, and therefore it just feels like circumstance. Ultimately, you want to be the one survivor. This game really isn't a sandbox. It's something more focused, more railroaded than that, to be quite frank. It's not this big open world, which is Fallout the video game. It's something, I hesitate to say tighter, because at times it's wild and unruly. It's a little fiddly, right? Like the fact that, see this monster here? So say it comes out here, it moves, right? Like I said, based on these cards, and so, you know, this one would cause it to move, and so it moves here, and it moves here, and it moves here, and then it can move into this space and then hop right there. And then if you kill it, sometimes it can be a bit fiddly to be like, wait, where did that come from? Because you're supposed to put a chit back on the place it came from, which can frankly be like a little weird to keep track of. There are little fiddly things in this game like that. That's just an example. I've heard people say that it's better as a single player because of a lot of these issues, and the fact that there isn't a lot of player interaction. You will not fight each other in this game. The number one way in which you're going to interact with each other is by doing something before somebody else can do something, which is actually interesting, especially given the agenda card. Oftentimes the quests will have a one faction result or another faction result, which leads to this interesting thing where it's kind of like a race to see who achieves it, which is a bit of a problem given the amount of luck that goes into being able to achieve it, but it's fine and it's fun and it's Ameritrashy fun, right? I like it. I personally enjoy that aspect of the game. I enjoy racing my friends to scenario. I think it's funny when, if I do something over here and then that has repercussions for my friend later on while he's exploring some ruins, that's fun for me. I don't understand this game as a solo game because it's based on Fallout, and so if you're gonna play the game by yourself, I don't understand why you wouldn't just play the video game. I just don't get it. Okay, some people love the Fantasy Flight system where they have the learn to play and then the rules reference. Some people hate it. I am in the camp that I love it. I think it's a great system. I open this up, I learn to play the game, I throw this away, burn it in a fire, and then this is all I ever need. This needs to be an exhaustive thing, right, with an index. Okay, there's an index, I stand corrected. But as you can tell, it's light. There are many nouns and words, if you will, verbs sometimes, that are referenced in the game that are not in this rules reference. Or the sections that are there are not complete. I'm fine with this part of it. I get it. I get the system. This needs to be a more robust thing. Is this a game for everybody? No, it is absolutely not. And it's not even necessarily a game for Fallout fans. You're gonna reach a point where you've seen a lot of the main quest cards, and frankly, you're gonna get really bored of Vault 84, but if your play experiences are anything like mine, it's very difficult to get into Vault 109. And there's a lot of the same, these use the same ones in every single game, so there's a little bit of repetition, but there's still, for me, something really fun and addictive about this game. It's a beer and pretzels game that's kind of Fallout themed. Kind of just a fun, post-apocalyptic 1950s mishmash theme, which is Fallout, yeah, I'll grant you that, but you don't need to be bought into the Fallout IP in order to enjoy it. I don't think that this is a good game for someone who doesn't play board games and likes video games, and this is like their first one. I don't recommend it in that sense. But if you like board games and you like this kind of board game and you're amenable to this theme and you're okay with maybe house ruling a few things, I think it's pretty fun. Like I said, the agenda cards needs to be fixed, and I like my other changes. So you ready for my mods, what I call mods? This is my solution for the agenda cards. So instead of top decking one per player at the beginning of the game, you each draw one, and then you discard one and keep the other. That way, if you were given something like this, right off the bat of the game, you have a little bit of agency as to whether you're going for the shields, right, or the stars. And considering the fact that there are allegedly 2 factions associated with those, it's kind of within the spirit of the game that you should be able to decide whether you're helping the Brotherhood of the Steel or the Enclave. So, right there, that happens. Now, as I mentioned briefly, you see these little symbols? This controls the enemies in the game. So every time you turn one over, it tells you those enemies activate. So they get turned over at the end of every turn. So then the next time I complete a quest that tells me to draw an agenda card, I draw one, and I can either keep it, or I can exchange it with a faction card in the discard pile. Only a faction card. Which means I can say, okay, discard this card and get this freedom instead. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Brett, but this is just going to make that problem that you talked about happen more often, where somebody wins the game quickly because they just accumulate the same kind of faction card. Well, yes and no. I mean, first of all, you'll notice that already the discard pile is starting to empty out of that certain faction, right? So there's that. The other thing that's very important is you have to treat these cards like the first one of a type gives you the base one, and the additional cards only give you the additional text, if that makes sense. So this is a base 1 plus this text, and this is 0, but the text as well. So imagine it looking like this as opposed to like that, right? I also play it so that instead of the just scoring points for the difference, right, where that would be a total of, with these rules, that would be a total of, 5 points, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We do it a little bit differently. You get 1 for having any level of difference. So that's 1, that's 1, that's 1. And then you get another once it hits the orange of your thing. And that's really necessary to make it possible for this situation, right? If there were to be this big of a gulf between the factions, at least this way, if you've got shield factions, you can get at least up to 2 points per shield card, or 2 points and then an additional 1, by getting at least to there. It allows people with shield cards in their hand to be in the game as opposed to in a situation where they essentially have to king make for somebody else, which nobody likes to be in. That is my fix for the agenda cards. It gives players a little bit of agency. They get to draw a card and either choose between it or a card in the discard pile, and so it feels a little less random. than just top decking. Don't get me wrong, there's still luck involved in this system, and I don't have a problem with luck in my board games. You know, it's a problem in my Euro games, but this, for what this game is, I feel like they said, let's just make this a Ameritrash experience, and I'm fine with that. I just think that when it comes to the end condition of the game, the player should have some level of choice. That's the big thing that I recommend. And I have some other rules that I am going to include in a BGG post, and there's a lot of variants posted on Board Game Geek, and I'll put it in the description down below in the video. I'm doing that thing now that all the cool guys do where they like point at the screens. I have a couple other house rules if you're ready for it. You ready for this? Personally, I think in the main game, caps are way too few and far between, and it's inconsistent with what the actual video game feels like for me. So we play that if you defeat a monster, you not only get experience equal to the level, but you get caps equal to the level. It's a lot more fun that way because you get more caps more quickly, and if you're looking at the items that are over here that are for sale, you'll notice that some of them are ridiculously expensive. And I've got to tell you, in all the times I've ever played the vanilla rules, it's really frustrating how many times you're never capable of buying a good item. The game ends, it feels like it ends too soon, even though it takes a while. With all these variants, it kind of speeds up the leveling process. And the ability to gear up, because of course, the more quickly you can gear up, the more quickly you can go out and kill more bad guys, which is the #1 way you get experience. The other thing that we do is when you do an encounter that looks like this, so this symbol, which looks like this symbol, and you get a card, no matter what happens, we give you a base 1 experience, right? Because you get experience exploring this game, and it's kind of a consolation prize. Otherwise, the only real way to get experience is attacking, and it feels like, again, like a constrained choice. The last one is that if you look at, say, Megaton, you'll see that Megaton is a 3. So almost every time you go shopping, or you take one of these cards, one of the options is going to be shopping. And normally in the vanilla rules, you draw 1 and you get to pick, and then if there's more than 4 left, you discard 1. We play that if you're doing a 3, you draw that many, right? So you get to choose from this many. And this is kind of important in my opinion, because otherwise there can be this situation in the game where there's really no incentive to go to cities ever, because you know that the 4 things that are available you don't want, and you know that 50% of the choices on this card are shopping. And if you can't do the other choice, you end up being forced to shop, and that's a wasted turn. This allows you to at least go to a high-level city-type encounter, and if you are forced to take the shopping action, there's a higher probability that you will get a card, and it's also unknown too, and there's always something fun about an unknown quantity. I recommend this game if you're okay with what it is, and what it is a board game.